I am Greg Hoy, CEO of HappyCog.
Thank you, Greg, for inviting us into your home.
Thank you for coming. This is my home away from home.
Your home away from home, that's right. So you're in from the Philly office, staying here at the Awesome office for a couple of days. Maybe you can explain to us a little bit what it's like to run an office that has multiple locations.
It's never been that way for me. Like, we've always been centralized in one spot, and before Greg and I combined our companies, it was always all of us together, physically together in the same spot. He used to run a very virtual company, and so this is kind of a new thing for me, and it's I think it's more manageable to have two planets orbiting each other rather than having a bunch of little asteroids all over the place. I think it's more manageable to have groups of people that you can connect with. I mean, we installed a way too expensive video conferencing system that we use, that we connect with each other on a daily basis. And our project teams are intermingled with people from Philly and Austin. So it is very much, it feels like one family, which when we were operating as separate companies flying the HappyCog flag, we'd run into kind of turf issues. And by combining, we don't do that anymore. And by working with combined teams, that's not an issue. It's kind of an all for one for all thing. So it's worked out much better than I anticipated, and certainly to the extent that I'd hoped.
Awesome. So teams are obviously the critical part of design because we're in the service industry. Tell us a little bit about your experience building teams and maintaining those teams and maybe nurturing them.
Yeah. It's been probably the biggest learning experience of my career running an agency. When you're small, your team is your company. And we would sell ourselves as the company. So we'd go in and we'd say, when you hire HappyCog, you hire HappyCog. You don't hire one person, you hire everybody you see on our About page. And as you grow, you can't make that promise anymore. So we found ourselves, 15, 20, 25 people, and it was just scrambling to put together ad hoc teams for the right opportunities. There was no consistency with that. Some people, unfortunately, would get stuck with the same kind of work over and over again. So we wanted to have a little bit more control over that dynamic. So we started to commit to a team-based structure. We hired up to support 5 teams. We had enough people on staff for maybe 3.5 or 4. 3.5, I would say. But with the number of opportunities that we had in the pipeline, we felt confident that we could hire up to 5 to support 5 teams. So we went through a really intensive hiring process, which is something that we had never experienced before. We found a lot of great people, fortunately, in a very short period of time. The thing with teams for me is to make it as entrepreneurial as possible and give team members a stake in the action. That hasn't been fully realized yet. We're still working through some of the team dynamic issues, but I've always thought of it as maybe structuring it like a sports league, like at Major League Baseball, where you have divisions within the league, and you have general managers associated with teams, and there's some sort of friendly competition going on, and there are metrics that we apply to the success of each team, where there are standings, and then you run into a bunch of things. Well, my team's in last place. Like, how demoralizing is that? So we're thinking carefully through that stuff. But what we have seen is, by splitting into teams like that, team members are really generating a sense of self and a community, a micro community within the organization, and building cultures within their teams, which is something that I hoped would happen but wasn't sure. And I didn't want to artificially feed that, but it definitely has. Like, over the holidays, we have one team called the Tacos, and they made taco things for each other, calendars and all of this stuff. They have t-shirts. We have custom emojis in Slack with happy taco and sad taco. It's gone to that level, and I'm thrilled about that. And I know they are too, because they have a sense of decision-making and autonomy that they did not have before. And so it's been fun to watch. It really has. We also have we've since scaled back from 5 teams down to 3 because we felt that's kind of the sweet spot where we need to be. And so there's more players on each team. There's 2 or 3 designers, 2 developers, which provides a bit of depth on the team that we didn't have before. And we keep our teams together for a year. So you work with the people you work with, and if you have any differences or communication issues or things like that, you have a year to work it out. But it provides, from at least the initial thinking is, it provides a period of stability where you are getting to know the people that you're working with. The people who are on your team were selected in such a way that one person might be strong in prototyping, one person might be a little stronger in like Photoshop, and so there's opportunities for kind of cross-pollination of skills and things like that. So that's another benefit. It's been great so far. It really has. It's been a fun experiment.
So a lot of these things, like you say, leadership is a really big experiment because there's no guidebook for this, and especially in our industry that's only been around for a short amount of time.
Right.
It certainly is not a guidebook. If it would be, it'd probably be a web-based guidebook.
Right.
So you've obviously had some experiences along the way that maybe you'd call mistakes or hard knocks.
Yep.
Do you remember any one or two particularly that
Greg and I did a whole workshop on mistakes. So yeah, and we only filled a half a day. We probably could have filled a week. Yeah, I mean, there's been some mistakes we've made along the way. Sometimes we're a bit. I don't want to say we're moving more quickly than we probably should with respect to decisions. Some of the staffing decisions that we made were probably a bit ambitious in terms of getting a number of people in at one time to satisfy a need that we anticipated. That need, working in this business, you see your pipeline as one thing one day, and it can be something else 2 weeks later. And so staffing up to support a pipeline that looks one way and one week, 2 weeks later is something else, that's a roll of the dice. And hopefully you have enough thought behind it where it's not going to be a situation where you have too many people. But we've encountered that situation before, so that's one. Sometimes in an effort to address a lot of things at one time, you don't have your eye on details enough. Like there's been some reply to all issues with email that we've encountered before, where potential clients have received some things buried in an email thread that's not something that we would want them to see, and so you learn from that very quickly. Like if you're not going to say something to somebody in person, you certainly don't put it in an email. There's been the whole kind of client vetting process is something that we've learned from. Sometimes you'll go after kind of the cash cow account because you think it'll set you up for the next year or two, and you're not really thinking about the warning signs that they may be displaying through that process. Like you're going to get a paycheck, but it's going to be the most painful paycheck you've ever gotten. And we've had a few relationships like that have dragged on for years. And it's because we were maybe a bit too ambitious to get that account and have that kind of security without really thinking about how it would make our lives for that period of time.
Right.
So, I mean, those are some of the bigger ones. There's certainly
a whole list.
There's people stuff that I learn from on a daily basis. Stuff that I went to school for business. I didn't go to school for psychology and to know how to necessarily understand what makes people tick. I picked a lot of that up along the way, but I'm constantly making mistakes with people and learning from those mistakes and trying to make sure I don't make those in the future.
So now that you're decades into being a design leader, how would you describe that style, your style?
My style has evolved. My initial style was very the super detail-oriented part of my style still, I think, exists, but I've learned to let go, which is something as you grow you have to do. Otherwise, you're just going to go crazy. I was very much, I don't want to say micromanaging, maybe approaching micromanaging, but I was certainly of the mindset of if I don't do it myself, it's not going to get done. Maybe not right, but the way I would do it. So in the process of letting go, it's realizing that you trust your coworkers and realizing that they're going to make mistakes along the way, and that's cool. Let them make mistakes. That's how you learn from them. We're just talking about mistakes. I made a ton of mistakes to get through the first few years of the company. And so my style now is a bit more hands-off, but I find that if something goes, the trajectory of a decision that somebody makes leads us too far down a path, I'm very much back in the mix and making sure that we make those corrections as we need to. I think, I want to make an environment. I've always said I wanted to make an environment that I want to work in.
Mm-hmm.
That was the whole, impetus for me starting a company. So I like to think that we treat our employees fairly. We provide them opportunities, and I want them to have experiences too. And we're focusing more on that these days. Not only projects that pay the bills, but projects that get people out of the office and experiencing the world and having opportunities with nonprofits or other client organizations that they never would have experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that to me is incredibly fulfilling. So I like to kind of introduce those opportunities when I can.
Cool. Do you think that your team would describe you in the same way that you just did?
They would probably skew more towards I'm still micromanaging. I don't know. Well, it was, I wrote an article about this, but it was Greg and I had ourselves reviewed last year, and we're actually going through that again right now. We're reviewing each other.
Mm-hmm.
We're working with a colleague that we both know to do that, and we're having our leadership team offer their insight into how we run the business. And you'll learn a lot through that process. And, when we first had that review, I learned a lot about myself that I didn't know. Like, people feared me to some extent.
Pretty scary.
Yeah, I mean, well, thanks. I mean, the people who knew me from when we were 5 people knew me. The people who came in, employee 30, 31, one of our employees said to me, I didn't know you were a designer at one point. I found that on LinkedIn.
Wow.
And I was like, geez, I have to when you get to that size, you have to make time for people and get to know them. And so, yeah, I mean, I think my perception of myself can be vastly different from what, especially new people who come into the organization, perceive me as. They might not know as much about me or what makes me tick, or when I go back in my office, what I'm doing back there. So, yeah.
So you've got obviously a lot of time ahead of you as well. How do you plan for that? How do you become a better leader?
For me, it's constantly learning. I mean, one of the absolute, kind of gifts that have happened to me, and it just kind of happened, was when we started OwnerCap. And it was purely, when we started it, one of the motivating factors was to create potentially an alternate revenue stream for us moving forward. I didn't anticipate that it would provide so much kind of professional development opportunity for me, and talking to people like yourself who do what we do, and learning from them, and learning what kind of the life cycle of a leader can be. For me, I'm kind of in the awkward teenage years of running an agency. I've got braces and like headgear and stuff, and I'm like trying to figure out, am I doing the right things? And at the other end of this, are we going to blossom, or are we going to have to retreat? Or, you think about all of those things, and you think about what constantly energizes you moving forward. Does client services still energize you moving forward? Does focusing in a particular niche energize you more than another? Can you construct an organization around you to keep you motivated so you are in that niche and constantly energized? I think about that stuff a lot. I'm not the guy to be in there certainly designing sites and maybe not performing critiques and things like that. But I think I offer some experience in other areas that some newer people in our office don't have, that I could potentially leverage into some new business opportunity for us. So that's what I'm always thinking about, what's next and how I can add value to the organization, where we've kind of backfilled the stuff that I used to do with other very talented people.
Good. And how do you maintain some kind of balance in your life? Because being an entrepreneur can be quite consuming.
Yeah.
And maybe also if you can answer also how you deal with stress.
Yeah. So before I had kids, it was work, and when I get home, it was work, and I was married, and it was fine. You know, my wife understood that, you know, some of the stuff that I was working on at home was necessary, and when I had kids, I realized that it's a completely different ballgame, and you don't have a choice in that decision. You know, it's your time. Like you have to commit to that, and you have to change the way that you approach your life. I have two kids. They're very young. They're just getting out of the sleepless stage. The youngest is now sleeping through the night. He's still getting up at like 5:30 in the morning sometimes, which for me actually isn't that bad. You know, the 3 a.m.s were pretty bad. But I leave the office at 5:30 usually, and I spend 2 or 3 hours before the kids go to bed with them. And I spend as much time as my mornings are variable, so I spend as much time with my family in the morning as I can. Sometimes I leave early because I've got meetings. Sometimes I stay until 10 and I come in at 10:30. But I try to balance a lot better. The other thing with kids is that sometimes when you're working at work and you come home, you know, your lifestyle starts to degrade a bit. You get hungry and you just grab whatever you want, and like, you know, or you'll go out to 1 or 2 happy hours more than you used to, and you'll put on the beer weight and stuff like that. So I'm actively exercising again, which is something that took a hiatus for some time, and I do find that it helps. You know, I know you exercise a lot, and you know, just getting out there. I actually think about work when I exercise, but it's kind of a therapeutic way of thinking about work. I cut my own grass, you know, like I do a lot of thinking when I sit on that stupid tractor, you know, and it's actually a great time for me just to kind of be away from it all and just stare at, like, you know, stripes that I'm cutting in the grass, and it's mundane, but it's really good kind of de-stress time.
I knew a CEO of a Fortune 500 company who used to do that.
Oh yeah?
He had a particularly large lawn.
Yeah.
As I'm sure a Fortune 500 person would have.
Yeah.
And he said those were the best 4 hours of his week.
It really, like, I look forward to it. I do. It's just it's therapeutic, I guess. Yeah.
Just swinging back to teams once more.
Yeah.
How do you recognize the right kind of talent? What are the skills, and more importantly, the soft skills that you're looking for in somebody?
First thing would be writing, and this is maybe a harder skill, but the ability to write is key for every single position we have in the company, and we haven't taken it to the point yet where a writing sample is required, but we've been doing it lately, and I think we're going to continue doing it. You know, being able to post intelligent comments to a client based upon feedback, or to craft a communication brief, or to write a proposal, and not spell things incorrectly, and not rely on, you know, grammar checkers and things like that. Like, I can't emphasize the importance of that enough, because you cannot escape it in your job. I don't care what you do.
So your English teacher was right.
What's that?
So your English teacher was right.
My English teacher was right, and I wasn't that good at English in school, and somehow through my early work career, I just got it. I was like, this is important, and I actually remembered a lot of stuff that I didn't think I would. And, you know, I actually love editing. I remember, I think Jason Fried talking about that. Like, editing is pretty therapeutic. It's like pruning a garden. It's like getting by with, you know, making sense out of the fewest words possible, and making sure you're speaking actively and things like that. And I enjoy doing that. Some of the other soft skills, like interpersonal communications, the ability to communicate with each other. I mean, that's also like so important. One of the things that tends to drive me crazy is people having conversations about other people without having the conversation with the person they want to have the conversation with. It's been an ongoing thing, not only, you know, in my current work life, but like ever since I've been in professional, like working somewhere for a paycheck, it's been, these kind of hallway conversations about, I wish this person would do that. And well, did you talk to that person? Like that, if somebody exemplifies that ability up front, and you can diagnose that or identify that up front, it's not always easy. That's a key thing. I think being able to present and being comfortable in a room. We used to, when we were a smaller company, subject our candidates to one interview with 13 people sitting around a table.
Wow.
And you were presenting at that point, whether you knew it or not. So every question that was asked, you were presenting to a room, and you either had a quivering voice and couldn't think on your feet, or you spoke up, sat up, and commanded the room. And that, to me, was a huge kind of, telling factor as to whether or not somebody could cut it in this. One of our core values is that people should share what their knowledge, and they should share it in public ways. They should write, they should speak, they should teach. And if you're not comfortable talking in a room of 13 people about stuff that you do, you should be able to learn that, or you should, or maybe that particular role isn't for you. So that's one of the things we consider as well.